Tourism, the promise of adventure, relaxation, and escape. But what happens when a dream trip turns into a nightmare? From cursed islands to perilous peaks, we're diving into an hour of the worst deaths in the history of tourism. These are real stories, backed by chilling proof that will make you rethink your next vacation. Get ready for 1 hour of the worst deaths in the history of tourism, with proof. Jamaica's tropical allure promised sun-soaked beaches, vibrant culture, and a taste of paradise, which drew 53-year-old British tourist Timothy Southern from Lichfield, Staffordshire. In May 2022, Timothy arrived at the Royal Decameron Club Caribbean in St. Anne with his family, eager to enjoy the warm climate and the resort's relaxed atmosphere. Their vacation began as anticipated, with days spent swimming and exploring and evenings filled with delicious food, live entertainment, and tropical cocktails. One evening, Timothy joined 2 fellow guests in a drinking challenge to consume all 21 cocktails on the hotel's menu in one sitting. Although Timothy had already been drinking brandy and beer earlier in the day, the challenge's allure was irresistible. The atmosphere was pleasant initially, with the men toasting and enjoying each other's company. Not a habitual heavy drinker, Timothy was caught up in the excitement and festive environment. As the night progressed, Timothy drank 12 of the 21 cocktails. The mix of alcohol, combined with the heat and his earlier drinking, began to overwhelm him. Despite growing discomfort, he continued to partake, caught up in the evening's revelry. The cumulative effects of the alcohol took a toll on his body, though Timothy, immersed in the holiday spirit, barely noticed the creeping discomfort until it became too late. Eventually, Timothy decided he had had enough. The challenge, which had started as a fun diversion, now made him feel unsteady and nauseous. He said his goodbyes and made his way back to his room. The familiar surroundings of the resort now slightly blurred and distorted by the alcohol coursing through his system. His family, unaware of the extent of his drinking, assumed he was just tired from the day's activities and prepared to retire for the night themselves. It wasn't long after he returned to his room that Timothy's condition worsened. What had initially felt like a manageable level of intoxication quickly escalated into something much more severe. His body, overwhelmed by the excessive alcohol, began to rebel. He felt a sharp pain in his stomach, followed by a wave of nausea that left him gasping for breath. Desperate for relief, he tried to force himself to vomit, but his coordination was impaired, and he could feel himself choking. A family member, noticing Timothy's distress, rushed to his aid. They managed to turn him onto his side, placing him in the recovery position in an attempt to prevent him from choking further. Panic set in as they realized the severity of his condition. His skin was cold and clammy, his breathing shallow and labored. They called for help, their voices filled with urgency as they pleaded for someone to summon an ambulance. Minutes ticked by, each one filled with increasing dread as Timothy's condition deteriorated. A nurse eventually arrived, but to the horror of Timothy's family, no ambulance had been called. The nurse, seemingly unsure how to handle the situation, hesitated, prompting the family to urge her to act. Despite their desperate pleas, it was clear that time was running out. The nurse finally began chest compressions, but Timothy's body showed little response. His pulse was weak, his skin now tinged with the coldness of hypothermia. The family's worst fears were confirmed when Timothy was pronounced dead. The cause of death was later determined to be acute gastroenteritis due to alcohol consumption, a stark and clinical explanation for the tragic loss of life that had unfolded in what was supposed to be a place of relaxation and joy. The impact of the night's events left Timothy's family reeling, their vacation forever marred by the senselessness of the situation. In the following days, the Southern family struggled to understand what had happened. They were angry, grief-stricken, and filled with a sense of injustice. They believed that the resort had failed in its duty of care, not only by allowing the drinking challenge to take place, but also by not responding adequately when Timothy's life was in danger. The realization that their travel insurance did not cover the repatriation of Timothy's body only added to their heartbreak, forcing them to start a GoFundMe campaign to bring him back home to the UK. Earl Bennett made Preston, UK his home, where he became a well-known upholsterer and respected figure in the West Indian community. Despite his years away from Jamaica, his heart remained tethered to the island's warmth and beauty. As he reached his late 50s, the relentless pain of arthritis made the English climate unbearable, prompting him to spend extended periods in Hector's River, a serene village in Portland, Jamaica. In December 2011, Errol returned to Jamaica for the winter, eager to enjoy the tropical climate and reconnect with his roots. He looked forward to a special celebration planned for July 2012, when his daughter Zoe would join him for his 60th birthday. However, fate had other plans. During his stay in Hector's River, Errol unknowingly faced a grave threat. His cousin Clifton, who had long struggled with life's hardships, harbored deep resentment toward him. Despite Errol's financial assistance over the years, Clifton felt betrayed and believed he was owed more. On a quiet July morning in 2012, Clifton's simmering anger erupted into violence. Driven by greed and a distorted sense of entitlement, he broke into Errol's villa with a machete. What began as an attempted robbery quickly escalated into a brutal act of violence. Errol, alone in his home, fell victim to Clifton's murderous rage, ending his life in the place where he had sought solace. Shocked and terrified, Errol tried to defend himself, but Clifton's rage was unstoppable. The machete came down with brutal force, slashing through flesh and bone. Errol sustained 15 wounds, each more devastating than the last. Blood stained the floors and walls of the villa, the once serene space now a grim testament to violence and betrayal. Errol fought for his life, but the attack was too severe. Alone and bleeding, he succumbed to his injuries, his life ebbing away in the place he had hoped would bring him peace. Zoe, who had been preparing to visit her father, had her trip canceled at the last minute due to work commitments. It was a twist of fate that saved her life and that of her unborn child. Had she been there, she might have been another victim of Clifton's madness, but instead she was spared, only to be thrust into a nightmare when she received the news. When Zoe arrived in Jamaica, the horror of what had happened hit her full force. She walked into her father's villa and was met with a scene of unimaginable violence. The sight of her father's bloodied body, the evidence of the struggle that had taken place, shattered her. Her worst fears had been realized, and the grief was overwhelming. She had lost her father, and the island that had once been a place of joy and celebration was now tainted with tragedy. The local authorities eventually arrested Clifton in September 2012, but the wheels of justice turned slowly. The trial was delayed multiple times, much to the frustration and anguish of Errol's family. Each adjournment felt like a slap in the face, prolonging their pain and denying them the closure they so desperately needed. The case was adjourned 6 times, and the family's faith in the justice system eroded further with each delay. Years passed, and the legal battle dragged on, with threats and intimidation becoming part of Zoe's daily life. But she refused to back down. She had lost her father in the most brutal way possible, and she was determined to see justice served. Her resolve never wavered, even as the trial became a drawn-out ordeal. Finally, in March 2016, after years of fighting, Zoe secured the justice her father deserved. Clifton was found guilty of Errol's murder and was sentenced to 40 years to life. It was a moment of bittersweet victory for Zoe. She had fought tirelessly to see her father's killer brought to justice, but the victory could not get Errol back. The pain of his loss remained, a constant reminder of the violence that had shattered their lives. Zoe's journey to find justice for her father was long and painful, but she never gave up. Though the years passed and the world moved on, the memory of Errol Bennett and the legacy of love he left behind would never fade. In March 2023, Dion Atherton, a father of 2, traveled to Spain with his girlfriend Leanne Coleman for a long-anticipated vacation. The prior year, Atherton's plans for visiting the country had been thwarted by the unfortunate delay in the arrival of his passport. With a heart filled with excitement, Atherton arrived in the country with his partner and lodged in a hotel room with a balcony. Upon his arrival, he wasted no time reaching out to his family. He eagerly recounted to his father the incredible warmth of the country. However, tragedy struck before the day drew to a close. Atherton tragically plummeted from the balcony of their hotel room. He subsequently lost his life due to the injuries he sustained during his fall. An investigation was launched into his death, but no concrete reports have been released to the public, leaving so many unanswered questions as to what happened. In the wake of Atherton's untimely passing, an outpouring of love and tributes flooded in from friends and family alike. According to reports, all his friends thought he was an absolutely sound and amazing bloke. His demise weighed heavily on the heart of his father's wife, Sarah, who held a deep fondness for him. Furthermore, Atherton's partner Leanne and their children were profoundly wounded by his sudden departure, as he was typically known for spending every free moment he had with them. As the time for repatriating Atherton's body approached, his family, like many others who have faced a similar situation, discovered that Atherton had no insurance in place before making the trip to Spain. This meant there were no available funds to facilitate the repatriation process. They turned to crowdfunding to gather the necessary funds, launching a GoFundMe campaign. Initially, they set a modest target, but it was later increased to £10,000 due to how expensive repatriations could be. Nearly £6,000 was generously donated through over 120 contributions from friends, family, and compassionate strangers. These funds served their intended purpose, covering the costs of repatriating Atherton's remains. The rest were donated to a trust for his children. Ray Gibbon, an adventurous 26-year-old from Queens, New York, was exploring Jamaica in November 2017, staying at her grandmother's hotel in Montego Bay. Known for her roles as a model, aspiring filmmaker, and globetrotter, Desiree had traveled to reconnect with her roots and plan for film school in Europe. Montego Bay's vibrant culture and stunning beaches offered a perfect respite from New York's hustle, blending comfort with opportunity. Desiree immersed herself in local life, seeking a bartending job to fund her dreams while exploring the island's hidden corners. Her openness and enthusiasm brought her into contact with various locals, some welcoming, others potentially dangerous. Despite the allure of island life, areas like Anchovy, just miles from where she stayed, she carried a reputation for danger that Desiree either overlooked or chose to ignore. On November 26, 2017, Desiree seemingly left her grandmother's hotel to meet someone. She never returned, and the following morning, Anchovy residents discovered her body hidden among the bushes. Her throat was slashed and her face was bruised, revealing a brutal attack. The violence shocked the community, which had a fragile trust in local law enforcement. Despite the grim circumstances, justice seemed elusive in the face of such brutality, and the challenges of investigating crime in a place where safety and trust were already tenuous. Devastated by the news, Desiree's family was left grappling with the unthinkable. How could this happen to her, in a place that was supposed to be safe, surrounded by people she trusted? Her mother, Andrea, was particularly haunted by the thought that her daughter's killer was someone she knew. Desiree had always been careful, aware of the dangers of being a young woman traveling alone. Yet it seemed that her trust had been misplaced, her openness exploited by someone who had gained her confidence only to betray it most horrifically. The investigation into Desiree's murder was slow and frustrating. Jamaican authorities, already stretched thin by the demands of their jobs, struggled to piece together the events leading up to her death. There were no immediate leads, and no suspects were brought in for questioning. The lack of progress fueled rumors and speculation, each theory more disturbing than the last. Some believed it was a crime of passion, driven by jealousy or anger. Others suggested a more calculated motive, perhaps linked to the darker aspects of island life that Desiree had unknowingly brushed up against. Andrea, desperate for answers, remained convinced that her daughter had been lured away from the hotel's safety. The fact that Desiree's purse, money, and identification were missing only reinforced her belief that the attack was premeditated, that someone had targeted her specifically. The idea that Desiree's killer might still be out there, free to harm others, was almost too much to bear. As the weeks turned into months, the case grew colder. Jamaican authorities released few details, citing the ongoing investigation, but it was clear that progress was minimal. Desiree's family, left in limbo, continued to press for answers, but their calls for justice seemed to fall on deaf ears. The reality of the situation was harsh. In a place like Jamaica, where resources were limited and crime was often met with indifference, the likelihood of finding her killer was slim. Desiree's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of even the most beautiful places. Her death was a stark illustration of how quickly life could be snatched away, and how trust could be shattered in an instant. For those who knew her, the pain of her loss was compounded by the knowledge that her dreams of film school, of making a name for herself in the world, would never be realized. Taylor Rankine, a 26-year-old adventurer from Ontario, Canada, had long dreamed of cliff diving and carefully planned his vacation to Negril, Jamaica, known for its stunning cliffs and crystal-clear waters. Negril's dramatic coastline and vibrant atmosphere made it a paradise for thrill-seekers eager to test their limits against the backdrop of the Caribbean Sea. On a bright azure day, Taylor and his friends spent the morning at 7 Mile Beach, enjoying the sun and warm waters. By afternoon, they headed to the iconic cliffs, famed for their breathtaking views and varying heights. While popular among locals and tourists, the cliffs were notorious for hidden underwater hazards, posing risks even to experienced divers. Having researched and practiced diving techniques, Taylor felt excitement and apprehension as he approached one of the higher jumping points. The views were spectacular, but the height was daunting. He took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the steps needed for a safe dive. Precision in speed, form, and timing was crucial to avoid disaster. With his friends cheering him on, Taylor prepared to jump. Balancing excitement with nerves, he focused on his training and gauged the distance to the water. He leaped with grace and confidence, feeling the exhilarating rush of weightlessness. As he soared through the air, he angled his body downward, readying himself for the impact, eyes fixed on his intended landing spot. However, an unexpected and tragic turn of events unfolded as Taylor neared the water. The The sea, which had seemed inviting and serene from the cliff, was not the smooth expanse he had anticipated. Hidden rocks lay beneath the surface, obscured by the crystal-clear water. These underwater hazards were difficult to detect from above, even for experienced divers and jumpers. Rather than being a clean entry, the impact struck the hidden rocks with a force that Taylor could not have foreseen. The water muffled the sound of Taylor's collision with the rocks, but the impact was violent. The sudden jolt threw his body off balance and immediately submerged him. His friends, watching from above, saw their companion's splash and sudden disappearance. Panic set in as they scrambled to get help, their previous excitement giving way to a desperate urgency. Local rescue efforts were swift, but ultimately too late. Taylor was retrieved from the water and rushed to a nearby hospital. A sense of helplessness marked the journey, the situation's urgency overshadowing any hope for a positive outcome. Upon arrival at the hospital, medical personnel worked frantically to save him. But despite their best efforts, Taylor was pronounced dead. The extent of his injuries, including the severe trauma from the impact with the hidden rocks, was too grave to overcome. The incident sent shockwaves through the community. Taylor's friends were devastated, grappling with the loss of their companion and the circumstances of his death. The local police conducted an investigation into the accident, their findings attributing the cause of death to the collision with the submerged rocks. The tragedy, however, did not end there. The accident became controversial when Dwayne Cook, a Canadian tourist who had previously jumped from the same cliffs, publicly disputed the police report. Cook claimed that when he had made similar jumps, there had been no rocks in the area where Taylor had jumped. He suggested that Taylor's death might have resulted from an issue with the dive itself, perhaps a miscalculation or a problem with his technique, rather than the presence of hidden rocks. Cook's claims introduced an additional layer of complexity to the already painful situation. His assertions raised questions about the safety of the cliff diving spots and the accuracy of the local authorities' findings. The debate over the actual cause of Taylor's death sparked discussions about the inherent dangers of cliff diving and the need for more extraordinary safety measures at popular tourist sites. The tragedy of Taylor Rankine's death highlighted the dangerous nature of extreme sports and the unpredictable risks associated with activities like cliff diving. The cliffs in Negro, while renowned for their beauty and allure, were reminders of the fine line between adventure and danger. Taylor's accident was a sad reminder of the potential consequences of misjudging a jump, the hidden hazards beneath seemingly inviting waters, and the critical importance of safety and preparedness in extreme sports. Barbara Scott Jones, a vibrant woman from Yorkshire, England, moved to Jamaica with dreams of a perfect life. After marrying local man Delroy Scott, her days were filled with sunlit beaches and reggae rhythms. However, her fairy tale began to unravel after their divorce. Determined to start anew, Barbara focused on renovating her Jamaican home in Somerton, aiming to return to England. During this transition, she grew close to Omar Reed, a 30-year-old local hired for the renovations. Their professional relationship evolved into a complex personal one, adding to the complications in Barbara's life. By late 2004, Barbara was amid a significant life change. She was preparing to leave Jamaica and return to England, a decision that involved more than just physical relocation. It marked the end of an era in her life. Amidst packing and overseeing the renovation work, Barbara ended her relationship with Reed. The decision to terminate their affair added tension to an already turbulent period in her life. The finality of her departure and the emotional strain of their breakup created an atmosphere ripe for conflict. On December 14th, Barbara Scott Jones was reported missing. Her absence was alarming, given her usual routine of regular communication with her family in England. Her daughter, Miss Yildiz Jones, became increasingly concerned after failing to reach her mother for over 10 days. Barbara, known for staying in touch consistently, had yet to respond to numerous phone calls and messages. The silence was unusual and troubling. Miss Yildiz Jones's concern deepened when she finally spoke with Omar Reed. Reed, who was supposed to be a caretaker and worker at the home, informed her that Barbara had left with another man and would return in a few days. The explanation seemed inconsistent with Barbara's character and their established communication patterns. The alarm bells rang louder. Something was not right. The Jamaican police began their investigation, initially grappling with the complexities of Barbara's personal life. The investigation revealed that Reed had a history of involvement with Barbara, casting him as a critical figure in the case. The pathologist report disclosed that Barbara had suffered blunt trauma to the head, resulting in a fractured skull. The brutality of the attack indicated a violent confrontation. As the investigation unfolded, Reed became the prime suspect. Barbara's body was discovered in a septic tank at her Somerton property. The tank had been hastily sealed with cement to conceal the crime. Her body, stripped to her underwear, was a grim testament to the violence that had ended her life. The discovery was shocking, a brutal conclusion to a life that had once been filled with hope and promise. Barbara's family initially responded with disbelief and denial. They maintained that Reed was merely a worker and had no intimate involvement with Barbara. They insisted there was no evidence of a romantic relationship and portrayed Reed as a simple caretaker. However, local reports and police investigations painted a different picture. District Constable Rosemary Armstrong stated that Barbara and Reed were often seen together, and their relationship had been widely known in the community. The circumstances surrounding Barbara's murder left many questions unanswered. The motive behind the crime remained speculative. Some speculated that jealousy or personal conflict could have driven Reed to commit such a heinous act. Entangled in a complex web of personal and professional dynamics, Barbara and Reed's relationship cast a shadow over the tragedy, intensifying the mystery and intrigue surrounding their lives. The morning of December 6, 2016, dawned bright and beautiful atop Mount Warning near the coastal town of Byron Bay in Australia. 24-year-old American Sam Beatty and his girlfriend Michelle Segala, 23, had spent the night camping on the mountain summit, eager to take in the breathtaking sunrise views. Little did they know the tranquil scene would be shattered by unthinkable tragedy. Sam and Michelle were just 8 weeks into an epic gap-year adventure around Australia after graduating from the University of Denver and Fordham University, respectively. The couple had been working at Pop Market in Brooklyn before embarking on the trip of a lifetime down under in a camper van. Their social media posts depicted two carefree souls in love, exploring Australia's natural wonders and delights. But on that fateful morning, their dream adventure turned into a nightmare. As the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, a powerful thunderstorm struck the exposed summit of Mount Warning. In a horrifying instant, a massive lightning bolt hit the tree that Beatty and Segala's tent was pitched beneath, sending an electrical current surging through Sam's body where he lay on the ground. 23-year-old Michelle watched in shock as her partner was killed right before her eyes. The searing bolt of energy left her with singed hair and minor head and neck injuries. But Sam had suffered catastrophic trauma. He was gone in a heartbreaking flash. For the next 3 agonizing hours, Segala was forced to remain huddled with Beatty's body, crying out for help that wouldn't come. Finally, 2 teenage hikers ascending the trail heard her desperate cries and went upon the harrowing scene. While one of the boys raced to summon emergency responders, the other valiantly attempted CPR on Beatty for nearly an hour before being forced to admit defeat. When paramedics finally arrived, there was nothing they could do for the young adventurer from Wisconsin, whose life was cut short in the cruelest of ways. A solemn procession carried Beatty's body off the mountain as the love of his life, Segala, was rushed to the hospital for treatment of her injuries and trauma. In a bitter twist of fate, Beatty's father was actually in Australia on a business trip when he received the knock on the door that no parent should ever have to answer. His beloved son was dead under unimaginable circumstances at the age of 24. The tragedy was chalked up to simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the aftermath of the incident, Detective Superintendent Wayne Starling addressed the press solemnly, extending heartfelt condolences to a young man's family and loved ones. He recounted the events that unfolded, describing how 2 individuals had been peacefully enjoying the natural beauty of the area when tragedy struck, reminding everyone of Mother Nature's unpredictable power. As the circumstances surrounding the incident are examined, many are left wondering, in an era of instantaneous weather alerts, how could the couple have remained unaware of the deadly storm's approach that morning? Did they misjudge the risks of their exposed camping spot? Or did the chaos of Mother Nature's fury block any possible warning from reaching the oblivious hikers? No matter the reasons, a senseless tragedy stole away the bright future of a loving young couple pursuing their wanderlust dreams. While Segala miraculously survived, her life has been forever changed by the traumatic events of that fateful sunrise on Mount Warning. In the blink of an eye, Sam Beatty's adventurous spirit and thirst to drink deeply from life's wonders was extinguished on an Australian mountaintop by forces beyond anyone's control. Now all that's left are the memories of a life captured on social media. Images of him swimming with dolphins in the Australian tropics, wine-tasting adventures through scenic valleys, and fishing for sharks off the coast. A life of exploration and experiences cut brutally short. It was supposed to be a fun getaway with friends, but for 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson from Charlotte, North Carolina, that fateful trip to Mexico in late October 2022 turned into a nightmare that ended her life far too soon. Robinson and 6 friends had traveled to the resort town of Cabo San Lucas to soak up the sun and enjoy some vacation revelry. However, a desperate call went out for medical assistance less than 24 hours after arriving at their luxury rental villa. Robinson had been found unconscious and unresponsive in the room. When the doctor arrived, Robinson's friends claimed she had consumed too much alcohol and became ill. Despite the physician's recommendation to transport her to the hospital, the group insisted she receive treatment at the villa instead. Tragically, Robinson's condition only worsened after a frightening seizure. Paramedics rushed to the scene, performing CPR and other life-saving measures, but it was too late. Shanquella Robinson was pronounced dead that evening from what was initially ruled as alcohol poisoning. Her family back home immediately sensed something was amiss as details from Robinson's friends continuously changed and conflicted with one another. Some said she was discovered on the floor, while others claimed she was found in bed or a chair. Their stories about seeking medical care also didn't add up. Then the shocking autopsy results came in. Robinson's death wasn't caused by alcohol at all, but rather a broken neck and spinal cord injury. As if that wasn't disturbing enough, an appalling video began circulating online showing one of Robinson's female friends savagely beating the young woman while she was naked in their villa. The horrific footage left Robinson's loved ones disgusted and demanding answers. How could such a violent assault have occurred without her supposed friends intervening or seeking immediate emergency care? Why would they have lied about the circumstances leading to her death? Mexican authorities reopened their investigation and determined that Robinson was the victim of femicide, directly killed by a member of her travel group. They issued an arrest warrant for the direct aggressor and sought to deport that individual to Mexico. However, over 6 months later, no arrests have been made, and the U.S. Department of Justice has announced it will not pursue federal charges, stating there is insufficient evidence to prove a viable criminal case. For Shanquella's grieving mother, Salamandra, and the rest of her heartbroken family, this lack of justice has been another excruciating blow. They feel the system has failed them at every turn, leaving them to pursue accountability on their own relentlessly. Tears streamed down her mother's face as she spoke to the reporters, her voice heavy with emotion. She expressed the devastation her daughter Shanquella had endured, feeling as though her life had been shattered and disregarded. The family's attorney echoed these sentiments, denouncing the responses from both Mexican and U.S. authorities as a profound injustice for Shanquella's family. Although no arrests have materialized, Robinson's loved ones refuse to give up their quest to honor Shanquella's legacy. They have pleaded with the Biden administration and government officials to prioritize this tragic case and provide transparency about the investigation's progress. At a rally commemorating 6 months since her sister's tragic death, Robinson's sister passionately called for action, urging authorities to take proactive measures such as implementing tracers on individuals and holding accountable those responsible by placing them in jail. Her words resonated with the gathered crowd, echoing the frustration and demand for justice in the wake of the loss. So where does the pursuit of justice stand for Shanquella Robinson? Why haven't the friends who were present and the suspected perpetrator captured on video been apprehended? What further action can the U.S. and Mexican governments take to finally provide this heartbroken family with the answers and closure they so desperately crave? Only time will tell if Shanquella's story prompts the justice her loved ones continue fighting for. John Heathcote and Abby Lutz had embarked on a dream vacation to Mexico, eager to bask in the sun and enjoy the luxury of the renowned Rancho Pescadero Hotel. Little did they know that their getaway would take a tragic turn, leaving their families devastated and demanding answers. On June 13, 2023, the young couple from California was found lifeless in their hotel room at the upscale resort in El Pescadero, a tranquil village in Baja California Sur. According to preliminary investigations, Heathcote, 41, and Lutz, 28, had succumbed to the inhalation of toxic gas, and their bodies were discovered approximately 10 to 11 hours after their passing. The news sent shockwaves through their loved ones, who were left grappling with the sudden and mysterious circumstances surrounding their deaths. Abby's family revealed that she had been in contact with them days earlier, complaining of feeling unwell and seeking medical attention for suspected food poisoning. Little did they know that those would be her final communications before the heartbreaking silence. As the investigation unfolded, a chilling account emerged from the first responders on the scene. Fernando Valencia, a paramedic who entered the couple's room, recounted the harrowing experience to the audience of Good Morning America.
It was one of the worst experiences that I felt.
Describing how both he and his partner began to feel dizzy as soon as they went inside the room.
Went out of the room as soon as possible, and I was afraid for my partner, because my first thought in mind, it was like, are we gonna die?
Fearing for their lives, they hastily exited, Valencia's primary concern being the safety of her companion. The incident raised serious concerns about potential gas leaks at Hyatt Hotel's oceanfront property. However, the hotel's management adamantly denied any issues with its infrastructure or facilities, including the presence of gas. However, a disturbing pattern of allegations quickly emerged from current and former employees. They claimed the resort had been aware of faulty gas detectors and alarms for months, but intentionally deactivated them because the loud warnings disturbed guests. Ricardo Carbajal, who previously worked as a night manager before resigning due to a pay dispute, confirmed widespread knowledge about the malfunctioning alarms and detectors. He even added that everyone, specifically those working in the hotel, was aware of the situation with the gas detectors, notably that they were not working correctly. 3 other employees, including a housekeeper who became ill just days before the tragedy from odors in the same room, corroborated the shocking allegations. They recounted overwhelming gas smells and concerns raised to management that were ignored.
Within minutes, it just hit me, this gas smell. Super overwhelming and unpleasant. So I called my server over and I asked to be moved to a different table. So I moved a couple tables over and the smell was still overwhelming even there.
One employee revealed they had detected unbearable smells of gas in room 534, the same suite where Heathcote and Lutz ultimately lost their lives. Another housekeeper said she was told not to worry about a leaking air conditioning unit in that deadly suite, claiming all was fine. While the investigation remains ongoing to determine if negligence played a role, the couple's families are beside themselves over the horrifying way their loved ones perished during what was meant to be a romantic getaway. Tears welled in Lutz's sister's eyes as she delivered a heartfelt message to the public, expressing shock and profound sadness over the loss of their beloved Abby. She spoke of Abby's adventurous nature and compassionate soul.
Abby was a light to everyone around her. She always had a smile on her face. It is our hope that more information will come to light to explain what happened to Abby and why.
In a plea for support, she requested thoughts and prayers from those whom Abby's life had touched. A probing inquiry into potential safety lapses regarding the hotel's role is likely to be conducted. If the allegations prove true that occupant safety was knowingly compromised, severe legal and ethical consequences could arise. Was this tropical resort more concerned about profit margins than addressing legitimate gas leak dangers? Why weren't preventative measures taken after employees raised repeated red flags about odors and malfunctioning alarms? Could more stringent safety protocols have saved the lives of this young, vibrant couple? The victims' families and the traveling public deserve answers to these disturbing questions. The idyllic waters off Ambergris Cay proved tragically deceptive for 17-year-old Logan Salon Pratt. What was supposed to be a dream tropical vacation quickly descended into unimaginable horror when the Oklahoma teen was struck and killed by a tour boat while swimming with her mother on February 14th. As the grieving Pratt family reels from the devastating loss, a complex legal case is taking shape around the circumstances leading up to Logan's untimely death. Both authorities and citizens of the Belizean island paradise are grappling with difficult questions about safety protocols, maritime rules and regulations, and the urgent need for emergency medical resources for visitors. At the center of the high-profile case is boat captain Jesse Smith, identified as the operator of the vessel that inflicted the fatal injuries on Logan that Valentine's Day. According to an official report, Smith has been taken into custody as investigators build a potential criminal case against him. However, a small group of supporters has alleged that Smith was simply a victim of circumstance. They claim the area where the incident occurred off Mata Chica Resort is a known boat traffic lane, where it is sometimes difficult to see anyone in the water when seas are choppy, as they were during the tragic encounter. Smith's family has also retained legal counsel, hoping the investigation ultimately clears the experienced tour guide of any liability in what they insist was an unavoidable accident. At the same time, they've expressed condolences to the devastated Pratt family over the horrific loss of the energetic teen. But Logan's mother, Tamra, paints a different picture of the fateful day's events based on her harrowing account. She told local reporters that she and her daughter were not recklessly swimming in a marked boat lane, but rather wading in shallow waters just offshore after snorkeling near the pier when disaster struck. Tamra claimed that not only was Smith's boat traveling at a high rate of speed with no one positioned as a lookout on the bow, but the captain failed to render proper aid after the collision. She alleges that Smith was rude, cursing and yelling at them, instead of immediately calling emergency services or attempting to stop Logan's bleeding. Tamra recounted the distressing events, detailing how, despite her efforts to seek help, the boat operator remained unresponsive and failed to provide any medical aid. Alongside another passenger, Tamra took it upon herself to attend to the severely injured teenager until they could reach a local clinic for further assistance. It was at that private medical facility in downtown San Pedro where Tamra said staff proved ill-prepared to treat her daughter's traumatic injuries properly. She tearfully questioned why more tourism dollars aren't being funneled into improving emergency training and resources to handle such crises. She noted that Belize has no Level 1, 2, or even Level 3 trauma centers in the country. Logan tragically succumbed to her injuries, leaving her shattered family to grapple with indescribable grief, along with an annoying search for answers and accountability. As the legal case now shifts to the Office of Belize's Director of Public Prosecutions, law enforcement hopes the coroner's report definitively mapping Logan's injuries and cause of death will help illuminate what transpired that fateful afternoon. The findings indicate the teen suffered hypovolemic shock due to external injuries from multiple sharp propeller-type wounds that caused catastrophic blood loss. While the agonizing details likely bring little solace to the Pratts, they could prove instrumental in determining the viability of charges against Jesse Smith and establishing culpability in the incident. Officials have made no formal accusations of wrongdoing against the tour guide yet. In the meantime, Logan's loved ones continue keeping her bright spirit alive through memorials and a clarion call for improved boater safety measures throughout the islands. Her mother is imploring visitors to take note of the absence of emergency medical facilities, a harsh reality she claims played a role in this preventable tragedy. Joseph Allen should have been celebrating a friend's birthday under the Caribbean sun. Instead, the 55-year-old man from Avenel, New Jersey, was found dead on the floor of his resort hotel room. Allen's lifeless body was discovered on the morning of June 13, 2019, at the Terra Linda Resort in the coastal Dominican city of Sosua, one of his favorite vacation destinations that he frequented multiple times per year. What was supposed to be a fun getaway among friends took a nightmarish turn that had Allen's family reeling and seeking answers. According to his sister Jamie Reed, the group had been relaxing by the pool on June 12th when Allen complained about overheating. Witnesses reported seeing the New Jersey man drenched in sweat as the Caribbean sun bore down. Allen decided to take a cool shower and return to his room to rest for the evening, rather than go out with his friends to continue the birthday celebrations. Jason, Joseph Allen's brother, recounted his last interaction with his sibling before the tragic incident unfolded. Allen had initially planned to go out for the night but ultimately decided against it, opting instead to stay in their room and unwind with a book. Neither knew this seemingly innocuous decision would mark the final moments before tragedy struck. The group grew concerned when Allen failed to meet up with his friends the following day as planned. They contacted the front desk at the Terra Linda Resort to request a wellness check on Allen's room. What they uncovered is every traveler's worst nightmare. Hotel staff entered the room to find Allen's lifeless body on the floor. Based on the scene, it appeared he had been dead for some time. The shocking discovery left Allen's loved ones reeling and demanding answers about what could have happened. Jason Allen addressed reporters, expressing concern about the lack of assistance and information provided by Dominican authorities regarding his brother's death. He emphasized the family's desire for answers and indicated a willingness to seek medical testing by American doctors if necessary. Reed mentioned that her brother was an avid traveler who took great pleasure in visiting the Dominican Republic repeatedly over the years. The family had no reason to believe he was dealing with any health issues that could have contributed to his sudden death, making the tragedy that much more baffling. Allen's mysterious passing marked the 9th reported case of an American tourist dying during or after a stay at the Dominican Republic resort over the previous 13 months. The cluster of deaths has cast a pall of suspicion over the Caribbean nation's tourism safety regulations and sparked concerns from travelers with upcoming reservations. Dominican officials have insisted the fatalities are isolated incidents and that the country remains a safe and welcoming destination for visitors. Over 6 million stopover tourists visited the Dominican Republic in 2018 alone, including 2.2 million Americans fueling the nation's lucrative tourism industry. Still, Alan's family is undeterred in their pursuit of getting concrete answers about what claimed the life of their otherwise healthy loved one in the prime of his life. They anxiously await further investigation results that could shed light on this terrible loss. But even with those findings, scores of questions remain. What was the actual cause of death? Was it an accident, foul play, or something else entirely? Could it have been prevented? And perhaps most haunting, could you or someone you love be the next victim on what was supposed to be a dream vacation? Kyle Barrow, a 27-year-old man from Oldham, Manchester, UK, had always harbored a deep desire to travel abroad. Despite his active lifestyle and love for hanging out with friends, he had spent most of his life within his home country and had yet to explore the wonders beyond its borders. So when the chance to travel overseas with his longtime buddy Cal popped up, Barrow couldn't contain his excitement, even though it was a last-minute decision. This was the perfect opportunity to check off items from his bucket list and have a blast while doing it with his friend of 10 years. Their destination? Turkey. They were still determining why they settled on that particular spot. However, from what reports say, one thing was evident. They had some grand plans for their trip, with jet skiing and parasailing ranking high on their agenda list. On June 6, 2023, the duo arrived in the country and headed straight for Manavgat. The next day, they hired mopeds to tour the town and visit tourist spots. However, this act was the costliest mistake Barrow would ever make in his short life. He reportedly had never ridden a moped before, meaning that Barrow had no experience that would have helped him properly navigate the busy streets of Manavgat. He also did not wear a helmet, a necessary safety recommendation when driving such a vehicle. So, unfortunately for Barrow and his pal, all of these didn't matter to them when they began the tour on the rented moped. Cal rode in front while Barron followed closely. At some point, Cal looked into his rear mirror and saw Barrow laughing, a sign that his buddy was enjoying himself. But the next time Cal looked behind him, Barrow was nowhere in sight. Immediately, he returned down the road they had followed to look for Barrow, where he discovered that the unimaginable had happened. There, Cal found Barrow lying in a pool of blood in a way that showed that he had collided with something. Shocked by the scene, Cal grabbed Barrow while screaming, even with cars passing him. He would later claim during an inquest that his friend was still conscious at the time, and that there was a lorry that had stopped nearby, which he speculated could have been the vehicle in which Barrow collided with it. Following the mysterious accident, an ambulance arrived at the scene but drove off without helping Barrow, after one crew member took only a mere glance at him. According to reports, Cal had to wait another 15 minutes before another ambulance arrived and rushed Barrow to the nearest hospital. The doctors began working on Barrow to stabilize his condition at the hospital. Meanwhile, Cal, who was also in the hospital waiting for his friend, contacted Barrow's family to inform them of the situation. In the end, all the medical efforts were in vain, as Barrow succumbed to his injuries not long after. A post-mortem, which was undertaken by a pathologist named Dr. Emil Salmo, revealed evidence of more than one injury, including a fractured spine. Dr. Salmo also believes that the cause of Barrow's death was due to multiple injuries. During the investigation into Barrow's death, the local police claimed that Barrow sustained the injuries after driving into a palm tree. However, Cal refuted the report during the inquest, saying that the likelihood of it happening looked impossible to him. In the end, it was stated that Barrow died in a road traffic collision, with the exact circumstances of the incident being unknown. His body was later transported back home for his funeral, although his friends, a girlfriend named Hannah, and his family had to crowdfund for him to pay the cost of flying him home and also to pay for his funeral. Meanwhile, tributes poured in honor of Barrow following his death. Friends described him as a legend, one in a million, the spine of every group, and the man that brought us all together. Some even commemorated their dear friend with tattoos, ensuring that his memory lives on. Last decade alone, Koh Tao Island in Thailand has been shrouded in darkness, marked by the deaths or disappearances of at least 11 tourists under mysterious circumstances. After multiple such cases, the tropical holiday spot was nicknamed Death Island, or even worse, Murder Island. Despite this sinister reputation, 31-year-old Theo Bailey and his longtime girlfriend Chantal Zeri ventured to the island for a vacation in March 2024, seemingly unaware of the grim fate that had claimed the lives of numerous travelers before them, and would also claim one of theirs. During one of their outings, the couple was pictured laughing while drinking from buckets of alcohol at a local bar. They were with other people on vacation, some of whom were breathing in nitrous oxide, known as hippie crack, and others were dancing provocatively as the evening went on. All in all, it was a night of trance for all of them. Shockingly, Bailey vanished without a trace at some point during the gathering. The exact moment of his disappearance is unclear, and whether he informed anyone of his whereabouts is uncertain. All that is known is that as the party wound down, Bailey was nowhere to be found. The following afternoon, after a search for him, Bailey was eventually found. However, it wasn't a joyful reunion. Instead, his lifeless body was discovered lying in a shallow drainage ditch outside the Rocktopus Diving Center near Sayre Beach. Reports indicate that Bailey had been lying dead in that location for several hours before his discovery. This suggested that his death likely occurred while the party from the previous night was still ongoing. Additionally, his phone was nowhere to be found, either taken by someone or lost during the incident. An investigation was promptly initiated by officers from the Koh Tao police station after they were informed of the incident. First, they cordoned off the area where Bailey's body was found to allow thorough examination by the forensic unit and members of the investigation team, and to prevent the contamination of any potential evidence. Then Bailey's body was recovered and transferred to the forensic department at Surat Thani Hospital for a detailed examination. As of now, the findings of his autopsy report have not been made public. As the investigation continues, Lieutenant Colonel Chokchai Suthimek, superintendent of the Koh Tao police station, made a startling statement during a press interview. He declared that there is currently no evidence of foul play in Bailey's death, despite the suspicious circumstances surrounding Bailey's initial disappearance. It is believed that the tourist walked and fell into a small water channel at night, leading to his death near the Rocktopus dive shop at Sayre Beach. No arrests have been made as the incident is considered an accident. Meanwhile, deeply saddened by the loss of her boyfriend, Bailey's partner turned to social media to express her heartfelt tribute to him. This was likely the hardest post she would ever have to write. Her best friend had become an angel. Having Bailey in her life for 10 years would never be long enough. She said she would spend the rest of her life missing Bailey, who would forever hold a place in her heart. She thanked Bailey for their fantastic and silly memories, stating how much she missed and loved her. Since the incident, many have speculated about the circumstances surrounding Bailey's death. While none offer a definitive explanation, it is mainly believed that cases like Bailey's are either concealed or inadequately investigated to safeguard powerful local interests on the island, which has a long history of violence and corruption. In the end, what happened to Bailey may forever remain unknown. Thanks to its ancient pyramids, which have stood for thousands of years and captivated visitors far and wide, Egypt ranks as one of the world's top tourist destinations. Yet for John Cooper and his wife Susan Cooper, their visit to this iconic land became their final journey, marked by a bizarre and tragic incident. In August 2018, the couple traveled to the country for a holiday with their family and friends. Based on Susan's recommendation, they decided to stay at the Steigenberger Aqua Magic Hotel in the Red Sea resort of Hurghada, as she claimed that she had enjoyed the best of services when she visited there earlier that year. But on the 8th day of their holiday, the room next to the Coopers, which had an adjoining locked door, underwent fumigation with pesticide, specifically lambda, due to a bedbug infestation. The fumigators had covered the adjacent door with masking tape, thinking it would be sufficient to prevent fumes from diffusing toward the Coopers' room. Meanwhile, when the fumigation occurred, the couple and their family spent time together at the hotel restaurant and bar, unaware of everything. Hours later, the couple returned to their room to retire for the night. They were accompanied by their granddaughter, Molly, on a single bed in their room. However, later in the night, Molly began to feel ill and could not sleep. She informed her grandparents, who thought it best that she spend the night with her mother, Miss Ormerod. John then took Molly to her mother, who stayed on the floor. This singular act appeared to have saved Molly's life, though this wouldn't become apparent until the following day, when John and Susan failed to show up for breakfast with the family. After their prolonged absence, Ormerod searched for her parents and was shocked by what she found. According to reports, as John opened the door of his hotel room, he displayed signs of severe discomfort, retching and contorting his face. He then slumped and sat in a corner of the room, visibly distressed. Meanwhile, Susan lay in bed emitting groans with vomit in her hair and scattered around the room. A strange, heavy smell also filled the room, later identified as fumes from the fumigation in the neighboring room earlier. After recovering from the shock of seeing her parents in this condition, Ormerod quickly summoned the doctors for help. Unfortunately, by this point it was already too late for John, despite CPR attempts to resuscitate him. Subsequently, Susan was promptly attended to and transported to a clinic within the hotel premises before being transferred to a hospital via ambulance. Despite exhaustive efforts to save her, Susan too succumbed to her condition, tragically passing away shortly after that. Following their untimely demise, the couple's remains were repatriated to their home country, encased in zinc-lined coffins. Initially, Egyptian authorities attributed their tragic deaths to natural causes, specifically citing an E. coli infection. However, 5 years later, during an inquest into their mysterious passing, a compelling revelation emerged. Several experts testified that the symptoms exhibited by the couple were consistent with those of individuals severely exposed to carbon monoxide. Consequently, it was determined that the pesticide-containing dichloromethane from the adjoining room was the primary factor in their deaths. They had inhaled the vapor, resulting in carbon monoxide poisoning, as the pesticide produces the poisonous gas when broken down by the body. This revelation finally gave the family of the couple the closure they had been looking for. Around the world, alcohol is beloved by many, yet when consumed excessively, what may have begun as a pleasurable activity can swiftly escalate into a tragic incident. Such seemed to be the case for 53-year-old Timothy Southern, who in May 2022 faced the dire consequences of overindulging in alcohol. At the time, Southern was enjoying a family vacation in Jamaica with his children, sister, and other relatives. They had chosen to stay at the Royal Decameron Club Caribbean, a popular resort located in the picturesque tourist town of St. Anne. One day during the holiday, Southern started his day with an early morning round of beer and brandy. The extent of his consumption remained unknown, leaving uncertainty about whether he had imbibed enough to become intoxicated. As the day progressed, Southern encountered a pair of Canadian female tourists embarking on a unique challenge: to complete the 21 cocktail challenge before midnight in celebration of one of their birthdays. Perhaps intrigued by the challenge and festive spirits of the tourists, Southern decided to join in on their reverie. He began gulping cocktail drinks one after the other in rapid succession. Upon getting to the 12th drink, Southern started to feel the effects of the alcohol deeply. He then decided that he had enough and would not be able to complete the challenge. Shortly after, he made his way back to his hotel room to sleep off the intoxication that had overtaken him. Upon reaching his room, Southern's initial plans to sleep off the effects of his drinking were quickly thwarted as he began to feel increasingly unwell. Almost immediately, he was overcome by a wave of sickness, prompting him to sound the alarm for help. Concerned family members, alerted by Southern's distress, rushed to his hotel room to assess the situation and provide assistance in any way they could. One of the relatives would later describe during an inquest the harrowing scene they encountered upon entering Southern's room. The relative claimed that they found him lying on his back, struggling to breathe, and emitting a distressing gurgling sound. Recognizing the situation's urgency, they quickly placed him in recovery, hoping to alleviate his discomfort. This maneuver prompted Southern to expel much of the alcohol he had consumed earlier in the day through vomiting. Southern's condition worsened, even after a nurse arrived at the scene. He had already started losing his temperature and was no longer responding to his name being called. His pulse could not also be found, indicating that Southern had lost consciousness. According to the relative, they initially hoped the nurse would take decisive action to assist Southern. However, to their astonishment and dismay, the nurse had yet to call an ambulance before turning up. She also didn't act as if Southern's case was an emergency, and only performed chest compression instead of giving Southern CPR when it appeared that he was no longer responding. Ultimately, Southern was pronounced dead after several attempts to stabilize him. A pathologist in Jamaica then ruled that the cause of death was acute gastroenteritis due to alcohol consumption. This meant that Southern suffered irritation and inflammation of his stomach and intestines after his binge drinking. In his case, the symptoms were so severe that his body was unable to cope with them. Southern's untimely death abroad presented his family with the daunting task of arranging for his transport back to his home country of Britain for burial. However, their efforts were quickly met with a significant obstacle when they discovered that Southern's holiday insurance, obtained through his bank, did not provide coverage for the unfortunate circumstance of his passing during the trip. Subsequently, they opened a GoFundMe on his behalf, raising almost $10,000. After all the required expenses were met, the rest of the funds were donated to the mine charity.